Welcome to Life After, a podcast for women to take you from feeling like you're just surviving to thriving, to creating a life you really love. Expect to discover tips and tricks to get there. Each episode will have actionable steps to empower you to make changes. I started this podcast because I've been through it all, from getting out of a marriage with a narcissist to completely rebuilding my life. And now I'm on a mission to help you too. You can change your life. It's absolutely possible. Hi there, friends. Welcome to today's episode. Let's jump right in. One of the scariest things that you can do is leave a toxic or narcissistic relationship. And there are so many reasons for this. On today's episode, we're going to talk about why that is, as well as discuss some really useful strategies for getting through this difficult chapter of your life. And please know that whether you're still in the relationship, you're planning to leave, or have already left, no matter what stage you're in, this episode will help. It's going to give you some really great tips. And also, know that you've done nothing wrong. Navigating this process takes time and intention. And the strategies that you'll learn today are going to help you in that process. So I recognize that this next thing I'm going to say may sound completely nuts. I'm well aware of that. I was lucky. I didn't know I was in a relationship with a narcissist until after he left. I know, that sounds crazy, right? I was also incredibly lucky that he left me, that I didn't have to muster the courage to leave myself. And in fact, truth be told, about 16 months before my ex left, I sat down one night and created a spreadsheet. Yes, you heard that right, a spreadsheet. Now, for those of you who know me really well, won't be surprised by that. But for the rest of you, that might sound like the strangest thing ever. And this spreadsheet included all of the things I could bring myself to do to stay with my narcissist. I don't know if it was instinct or fear, or maybe a combination of both, that made me think staying until my youngest was 18 was a good idea. Now, mind you, when I sat down that night out of sheer desperation for needing my life to change, my youngest was under 2. He was under 2 when I made this list. So, like many of you are thinking, I'm going to voice it. What the hell was I thinking? What was I thinking that I could stay in a relationship that was that painful for 16 years? I know, it's nuts. And in hindsight, or in reflection, really, I've felt a lot of shame over the years at the idea that I didn't understand or have the knowledge about what I was truly facing. And when I say that I was lucky he was left, in fairness, his leaving was after a period of 16 months where the most common thing I said was, okay. Now, me doing this, it did 2 things. It created 2 spaces. The first was, and again, I think this was really completely instinct. The first thing in me saying okay was I was disengaging. Now, I was disengaging in order to survive. If you picked up what I just said a minute ago, I was desperate. My life was such a mess. And for the most part, people didn't really know that. So in this spreadsheet that I put together, one of the things I remember focusing on was fighting less, having less conflict. And I'm going to explain in a minute why there was so much conflict. And for my own sense of sanity, frankly, I had to do this. And one of the ways that just kind of came to me was to say, okay, to not engage in arguments by just agreeing. Now, I want to take a step back and say that the level of conflict that was happening was so incredibly intense and high. And I knew that it wasn't good for me or my health or for the kids. And in hindsight, all of that conflict was a way to keep me engaged. So by that time in our marriage, my ex was already pretty checked out, both within our relationship as well as in the family overall. So because I didn't know any better, I fought with him to get him to be present with us, right? I mean, at that time, I would do anything, yell, scream, cry, beg, plead, try to show how great the kids were. I would do anything for the benefit of our kids to get him to show up for me, for his family. And unfortunately, this just fed his narcissism completely and totally. He had me hook, line, and sinker. So when I just simply started to say, okay, again, for my health, for my sanity, for the kids, that engagement, that pattern of making me mad, frankly, so that I would confront him, so that we would argue, right? That went away. And what I realize now is I was gray rocking him, even without even knowing what gray rocking was at the time. Now, the second thing that this whole process did was that when he came to me on April 1st, no less, to tell me that we should get a divorce, what do you suppose my response was? You guessed it. Okay. I have a really dear friend who always claimed that him doing that, telling me we should divorce, was an attempt to get me to re-engage with him, where I would beg him to stay. No, don't leave. We got to stay together for the kids. Right? But me doing that unintentional, it was conscious and it was intentional in the way that I meant to say okay, but not knowing the unintended consequences, right, of saying okay, shifted everything. It shifted everything. However, that's where my luck ran out. Because once it was decided that we would split up, I made the absolute mistake of telling him that the only thing I cared about in our divorce was our kids. If there is one thing that I could go back and change about that time of my life, that would be it. I handed him all the power. I instructed him exactly where he could continue to influence and have power over me by admitting that the only thing I cared about was our kids. Instead, if I had told him, or I wish I had told him, that it was all about the money, right? That's what he cared about. And I know that to some of you, that might sound incredibly bitter or like that, classic ex-wife on my part. However, I know that to be true. I know that money was his biggest concern. And just like deep down, the real truths about your narcissist or toxic person, I'm really willing to be honest about it because I want you to know that it's okay to voice what you know to be true too. It's okay. And there are parts about my story that I've been pretty open about, right? This piece maybe not as much, so this may be a new piece to my story. But by telling him that the only thing I cared about was the kids, that led to an almost 10-year divorce where the vast majority of the ongoing issues were about the kids. So again, I share this so that you can learn from my mistakes and also maybe start to see some of the patterns that you can try to avoid. It also helps us understand, it's the beginning of understanding why just leaving isn't the end of the abuse. Now, I keep using that word abuse, and I know that might be a trigger for many of you. And I acknowledge that. However, it is abuse. And abuse is all about power and control. And depending upon what type of, let's say, toxic person this time you're facing, you're living with, can dictate how the continuation of that power and control plays out. Right? So you can be experiencing someone taking power and control in situations other than just an intimate partnership, a marriage, a dating relationship, if you're living together, whatever that looks like. So just know my intent is not to trigger anything negative within you. I think it's really important that we start putting words to exactly what's happening. All right, back to my story. My ex didn't want to be with our kids, right? I've stated that several times already. He, however, was able to use them to continue to control me. He was only interested in being a part of their lives as it related to how he could hurt them to hurt me, how he could keep me engaged in communication with him, how he could retain his money. We're going to talk a little bit more in just a minute about that statement I just made about how he could hurt them to hurt me. So you'll get some clarity on that. One reason that I've generally not delved into this many details of my personal story is because to some of you, I may sound like an incredibly bitter and angry ex-wife. I acknowledge that. I see where that can happen. I assure you that I've processed all of this, and I am not. It would do no good. It does no good for any of us to hold on to justifiable anger. Now, you'll notice I said justifiable. For what many of you may have experienced in life, you should justifiably be angry. You have the right to be angry. But remember that old adage? Something about resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Part of the process of healing is to process the anger and then let it go. Process the anger and then let it go. Some of you, I know, you get it. You've already been there and you know the realities of what moving through and away from a toxic person looks like. And for those of you that are feeling that little niggling sensation in your gut or your throat, maybe in your chest or your head, take heart. You can learn from my mistakes. That is possible. What is absolutely true is that at all levels of our lives, be it in an unhealthy or abusive relationship with a partner, a toxic boss, or a toxic coworker, or even at an institutional level, these relationships are happening. This abusive behavior is happening regularly, routinely, and frequently. And until I feel this so deeply and so strongly, until those of us that have experienced this kind of toxic relationship, this treatment firsthand, until we really start talking about it, calling it out, problems like this will persist. So that's why during this year, during this episode specifically, but more generally, during this year of episodes, I will be talking more openly about what actually does happen in toxic or narcissistic relationships, the reality of what actually happens. And sometimes the best way that you can do that is by sharing specific examples, which will be not only details from my own story, which is scary and vulnerable, right? It's scary and vulnerable to do that. I'll also be sharing stories from clients. Of course, they will remain confidential who they are. But any way that I can share specifics about what it looks like to be in this place and anything that comes from that I can say that will help others avoid the pitfalls, I'm willing to do that. I'm going to do that. So as I wrap up this part of the episode, know that there are several areas where a narcissist in an intimate partnership can abuse you even after the relationship has ended. Now, these next few tips that we're going to talk about briefly are these next few categories. One, note that I've said they really happen in an intimate partnership, and many of them have to do with children. So they are alienation allegations. This is where parental alienation comes in. And for anyone that has been accused of this, please know it is a completely debunked theory. This theory, rather, has been completely debunked by science, and it is simply a tool used by the abusive parent. There's also neglectful or abusive parenting. Now, this is what I mean when I said that my ex hurt the kids to hurt me. He knew that he could retain power and control over me by what behavior the ways in which he treated our kids. All right. There's also coercive control. There's isolation. There's harassment and stalking. And if you're listening to this and you know someone that has told you that they are being stalked or believes they're being stalked, please, please, please listen carefully and closely to them. Being stalked is a very, very specific and difficult part of the way someone can be abusive, and it can be very difficult to sort out the details, and the person that's experiencing the stalking, it can make you feel very paranoid. So if you are ever in a situation that you or someone you know, please know there are resources out there to get help on stalking specifically. All right, there's also legal abuse, which obviously being in a divorce for almost 10 years, you can see where that can play out. There's financial abuse, and there's counter parenting. So counter parenting is kind of like, let's see, Mom, can I do this? No. Dad, can I do this? Yes. But it's at a level where the parents aren't living together. They're not talking together, talking with each other. And the parent that says yes is negatively impacting the parent of the parent that's saying no, or holding structure and boundaries and lines. So that's counter parenting. All right, I'm going to put a link in the show notes. And thank you to Tina Swithin of One Mom's Battle for creating this post-separation abuse wheel so that we've got the visual. just know that sometimes I have some trouble getting certain things in the show notes. So I'll try to put the actual visual there or a link or something that will allow you. If not, if I've got trouble with that, then please, you can Google it and find it that way. All right, so let's get to the practicalities of the episode now. I've told you enough scary stories for one episode. So, what do you do? What do you do about this if you're in a situation where you are trying to leave, have left, and are trying to recover or thinking about leaving? Well, the first thing I'm going to recommend or suggest that you do, invite you to do, is to do what I did. Before you actually leave, of course, you won't know, like I didn't, if they're planning to leave you. Before you actually leave, start protecting your space, your peace, your mentality, your money, whatever it is, whatever is unique to your specific situation. And again, this can apply whether you're in a relationship at home or at work, personally, professionally, right? Before you plan to leave, protect that thing that is most relevant to your situation. And from that, absolutely, most definitely start to disengage. This is going to help you. Disengaging is going to help you not only manage the time that you are still spending with your narcissist or toxic person, it's also going to start allowing you to set new boundaries more naturally. And you're going to be setting these boundaries around how you will, and more importantly, how you won't communicate with them. And if you need to stay in the relationship for any reason, please know there is never any judgment or criticism here. Never. Remember, I've already told you my brilliant plan was to stay in a relationship that I knew wasn't working for 16 years. So there is no criticism. No criticism. Please know that. No judgment. Okay, so this idea of disengagement, of disengaging, can happen with any toxic or narcissistic person. You can practice it with anyone that you find that you're in this unhealthy or difficult or challenging or toxic relationship with. Please know that what will happen in the short run, and I have no way of determining how long the short run will be because it's as unique as your toxic person, is that they're going to escalate their behavior to try to regain power and control and engagement. So first and foremost, know that that's going to happen. Be prepared for that to happen. And secondly, stay the course. You've got this, and you've got a community here that you can count on to help give you support to stay the course. Also, I'm fairly regularly putting content on my socials, Facebook and Instagram. I think for both, I'm at Locate Coaching, for how you can, quick tips and reminders and quotes and affirmations for how to manage working through this stage. That's why so much of my content is things like around mindset and quotes and affirmations, because those will be pieces that you lean on as you are in the process of disengaging, no matter where you are in the relationship. So keep that in mind. I do also have some videos on TikTok. I'm not sure if I'm at Locate Coaching TikTok as well, but I've got a handful of videos there that you might find helpful. And I will try to start doing more TikTok content, I promise. All right, the next thing I'm going to suggest, which I didn't do until later, is to start documenting everything. Now, this doesn't have to be a big formal process, right? It doesn't have to be. Just because I make spreadsheets for everything, it doesn't have to be formal. Just start writing things down. Now, you could create a spreadsheet, or you could start an official journal. You could also just start by writing it down by hand in a notebook, or creating a document that you just keep notes in. Whoever or wherever that is easiest, best, and safest for you. Just start documenting. And one of the things that you can also do that I've done before is voice to text, either by sending myself a text or an email. You can use, at least in Google and Gmail, you can go into the email on your phone and hit the voice to text button. And then, you might have to edit it some, but that's a great way to quickly document, or also just using the voice recorder on your phone. So those are some ways, if you don't want to be writing it down, that you can capture that documentation. So the reason that you want to document is there are actually several pieces to it. The first is you're going to start to see patterns. And once you start to see those patterns, once you start to recognize what the patterns are, you can start to change them. The other reason you want to do this is because at some point in this process, you might need evidence. You might need facts. So, for example, if you're keeping track of, I don't know, how many school events the person went to, you can use that evidence later potentially to show a pattern of their behavior. So it provides factual evidence when you are doing it in real time, as opposed to trying to go back and remember and recreate months or years later. Most importantly, when you are documenting and you start to see the patterns, you're going to realize how you can change your behavior around what they're doing. You'll start to see the choices that you have and the ways that you can be creating different boundaries and the way their patterns show up, so you can think strategically about how to counter those patterns. This is really, really, really powerful. And it starts to give you the clarity and confidence that you may have once had. So I want to address that a little more deeply. I just said it may start to give you the clarity and confidence you may have once had. Please trust me when I tell you, if you felt like you didn't have confidence before, that's okay. This process is definitely by starting documentation and seeing patterns and then responding to those patterns. That process is going to absolutely build your confidence as you gain clarity, as you realize it's not on you, it's not your fault. It's going to allow you to start owning the things that you can do by starting to notice your own patterns that you want to change. So I cannot stress enough how important documenting can be as you move through this process. All right, for the final tip of this episode, I'm going to recommend that you are kind to yourself. This may seem so incredibly simplistic and Pollyanna-ish, and I hope that's not the way you take it. The reality is that the messages that your toxic or narcissistic person has carefully curated to maintain power and control over you may very well have become part of your internal voice. And unfortunately, without doing some work, that voice will linger. So whatever the narcissist's message has been to maintain control and keep you engaged, whether it's making you second guess yourself over everything that happens or everything that you do, whether it's claiming that it's always your fault, whether it's them using that you're not worthy, you're not enough, you're too sensitive, you're too much, you're the problem. However they're playing out, however they're playing it out, right? Starting your own process of changing that internal voice is going to help inoculate their messages that they're going to continue to give you potentially and are not in your best interest. Again, it might seem like when I'm constantly posting quotes and affirmations and mindset stuff, it might seem like, how does this connect? Well, that's how. Because there are two parts of the work or the process that you're moving through. The first is removing yourself and doing so in a safe way. Or if you can't remove yourself, creating spaces where you are maintaining your mental health and feeling safe, right? That's the one piece. The other piece is that this person's in your head, and the way to get them out of your head is to be constantly and continually reminding yourself about why they shouldn't be in your head. And you do that by focusing on the more positive affirmations, quotes, focusing on the mindset work. So keep that in mind. Unfortunately, even when they're gone, that conditioning often isn't. So using those things I just said as part of your healing process is really effective. And that healing really fundamentally means learning how to separate your own voice from that one that was instilled in you against your will and again was not in your best interest. Okay, lots of heavy in this episode, I get that. Know that this is a safe space. There is no shame here. I literally have made every mistake at least twice. Remember in the beginning of this episode how I described naively giving away all my power to the narcissist at the beginning of our divorce, or how somehow I believed that staying in an unsafe, toxic relationship for 16 years was somehow the solution? I've made every mistake. There is nothing wrong with you. It is completely normal, and in fact, really likely that you won't truly be able to heal until some time away from this difficult relationship. Now, if you have to stay in it for any reason, we can still find strategies to help you internally move away in a way that's safe. Experiencing any kind of toxic or unhealthy relationships or the corresponding struggles that can happen after leaving, it doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It means that your nervous system is still trying to protect you. And a lot of people just don't get that. They may not get that deciding to leave, no matter where you are in the stage of your relationship, making that decision to leave is the moment you choose the possibility of a different life. And that's what we're aiming for, no matter when you make this decision. This podcast is a valuable resource for anyone seeking to make meaningful changes in their life. I'm here to support you on your unique journey, offering guidance and encouragement every step of the way. There will be new episodes on the second and fourth Wednesday every month. Please follow on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss any episodes. And also, please rate, share, like, follow, and subscribe. All the things. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to today's episode on why leaving isn't the end of abuse. Remember, taking the first step towards a new life is so worth it. Regardless of whether you are still with your toxic person or healing from your narcissist, Just take a step, one thought, one choice, one action at a time, and you'll get where you want to be. As we wrap up, here's the thing. I've made every mistake. I've literally been there and done that. It's one step at a time, and you'll get there. There's hope. You've got this. If you're struggling in a relationship and wondering if it might be controlling, you're not alone. Download my free PDF at locatecoaching.com/free gift to help you find clarity and confidence. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll see you soon.